Hey, um, can you see clearly? It's sunny in the background, but anyway, the most important thing is that you can hear what I'm saying. I want to speak a little bit about Jeremy Corbyn. He's attracted a lot of attention recently. He's a London MP, he's 66, and I'm going to show you a cover of the weekend. Try and get better lighting here. Yeah, that's better. You can see that and the picture there. Um, Now, the thing is, he's got a lot of attention because he's by far the most left-wing candidate there is here. And within the Labour Party, for a very long time, there has been a much more so than in other parties, debate about the left-right pendulum. Without giving a long-winded history lesson here, to my international viewers, basically, when Tony Blair became Prime Minister in 1997, that was a culmination of a gradual process of modernising the Labour Party. The Labour Party is traditionally a socialist party, but in the last 20 years or so, many people within the Labour Party have really questioned if it has lost its origins or not, especially under the leadership of Tony Blair. Now, when Ed Miliband was leader, there was a clear move to go back to the left, but for a lot of socialists, he didn't go far enough. And of course, he lost the election. Now, what's happening within Labour is there are people who are saying, well, look, we went down Ed Miliband's path of going more to the left and we lost. There's different reasons why Labour lost. It could be they lost ground one of the main things is that they lost ground to the SNP in Scotland because they supposedly had a more social democrat platform. I wasn't in Scotland during the election itself, so I don't know all the reasons why they lost so much to the SNP. Another issue was they were seen as being too close to the Tories on the Better Together campaign against Scottish independence. I personally really think that's ridiculous because that was not a party political campaign. It was about keeping the country together. So people who wanted to punish the Labour Party simply for being part of Better Together I think that's utterly ridiculous. Um, because it wasn't about party politics, it was about the country. Um, so anyway, Labour's having this debate at the moment. Well, Jeremy Corbyn was until very recently seen as the radical figure, as an outsider. To my American viewers, try and think of Bernie Sanders. Okay, there's been some analogies made between the two. So he's seen as a radical figure because he's a genuine socialist. He's definitely on the left of the party. Um, Anyway, I've just watched the debate on Sky News, which I've little respect for, but I wanted to see this debate. It was between Owen Jones, who's a well-known left-wing commentator. I think he works for The Guardian. He's not a politician himself, but I think he could be. He's clearly someone who has conviction. Um, and Owen Bennett, who I'm not familiar with, and Kay Burley. Um, Kay Burley, I have no respect for. I think she's a very unprofessional journalist. I think she's very vindictive, and she just utterly lacks any impartiality whatsoever. She's rude, she's condescending. I just do not like her much at all. Like I say, I don't know much about Owen Bennett. Owen Jones, I should say at this point, when I say I respect him, that doesn't mean I agree with him on everything. I regard myself as a centrist, and for me, a lot of the positions that Owen Jones would have would be much more to the left. In fact, there's areas I would strongly disagree with him on. But I do think he conducts himself well. I think he comes across as civil, and certainly in this debate, he won hands down in terms of how he conducted himself. Anyway, I'm mentioning that because he's a Jeremy Corbyn supporter. Um, Within the party, there's reports now that there's people joining up the party who are actually Tories in order to sabotage, in order to vote for Jeremy Corbyn because they believe that if Jeremy Corbyn is leader of the Labour Party, Labour will lose in 2020. Now, it might well be that by 2020, the Britain's a much more left-leaning country, so they might be scoring an own goal if that's really what's happening. There's even been calls within the Labour Party leadership contest for it to be suspended because of so-called infiltration. In the 1980s, this happened with the militant tendency, which was a hard left faction based around Liverpool. Um, there are many people, I think, see Jeremy Corbyn as another Michael Foot, a hard left winger who's sort of destined to bring the party to ruin. Now, if I was in the Labour Party, I wouldn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn. The reason is that I think it's all very well to say what you oppose, but I haven't seen any real evidence of how Mr. Corbyn's going to pay for these policies. I think he himself doesn't really believe that he's going to win. So it's very easy to protest and to criticise the government. But if you're an aspiring leader of a party, you need to also offer answers as to how you will be prime minister. I just don't see a prime minister Corbyn, and this is not necessarily because the right-wing media establishment would make that impossible, although they would. But even if we had a much fairer media situation, I still would be critical of Corbyn for several reasons. Number one, so I'm just getting something on the screen there. Number one, I don't think that he really has any answers as to how to actually run and govern the country. You know, it's all very well talking about what the government's doing wrong, and that's fine, that's important, but you also need to produce some really staunch answers of your own. I don't really see that coming from Mr. Corbyn. I think within the Labour Party, there's this sort of there's widespread support for Mr. Corbyn, and that's obvious, and that's democracy. If he wins from valid from valid Labour members, then that's democracy, and they have to accept him as their leader. Um, in terms of 2020, the most important thing right now is not what MPs think, although that is important, but also what people who vote Labour think. That's democracy. Um, no, anyway, without sort of going off track here, I'm slightly concerned about how a lot of these policies are going to be paid for. Having said that, and I do think this is an important point, already we're starting to see the media getting nervous about Jeremy Corbyn. The predictable right-wing media, the Daily Mail, etc. Um, not so much worried, but more like smug and ridiculing. The thing is, a lot of his social policies are not particularly radical. These are issues to do with basic fairness. Um, we're talking here about issues like welfare, and a lot of issues basically come down to, well, in my view, fundamental fairness. So I don't actually have a problem with a lot of his policies. In fact, I would go along with them. However, when it comes to Jeremy Corbyn, I'm more concerned about some of his positions in other areas. He is chair of the Stop the War Coalition, and for me, this is one of the main sticking points that makes me wary of Jeremy Corbyn. The Stop the War Coalition is an organisation set up around the time shortly before the Iraq War to oppose British policy in the Middle East. Now, that's all very well, but the problem with the Stop the War Coalition is they basically blame all the problems of the Middle East on Western policy. They will not attach any responsibility whatsoever to some of the actors on the ground actually doing the killing. I'm yet to see Stop the War Coalition make a direct condemnation of Islamic State. And I've reached the conclusion that this is basically a front for pro-Islamist groups. I'm not saying Jeremy Corbyn himself is pro-Islamist. I'm not saying that leading figures in the Stop the War coalition are pro-Islamist. But in focusing all their energy on demonizing Western governments, they're actually helping in the propaganda of Islamist groups. When the Iraq War was going on, during the height of sectarian violence in 2007, when we were hearing about market blasts every single day, instead of actually condemning the terrorists responsible, the Stop the War coalition insisted on condemning Tony Blair and George Bush for absolutely everything. Now, before I get shot down here, I am well aware that there is some very valid critique of both of those leaders. And I absolutely agree that the Iraq War was a massive foreign policy blunder. But I am very wary of an organisation that claims to be opposing fascism, claims to be opposing war, and is utterly silent when it comes to condemning radical Islam, especially on the streets of Britain. Um, that is just utter hypocrisy. You cannot say that you're opposing fascism whilst ignoring fascism. And Islamism, basically, if you look at some of the things they stand for in terms of their attitudes to non-Muslims, in terms of their attitudes to homosexuals, in terms of their attitudes to women, etc., etc., these are traditional left-wing causes, especially issues like gay rights. And yet the Stop the War Coalition has completely abandoned those areas because, frankly, they have a large Islamic constituency. And if anyone dares raise these issues, then the far left in the Stop the War coalition chirp out, slanderous claims about being as you're an Islamophobe. This really pisses me off. And basically, summed up, I don't trust the Stop the War coalition. I don't think they're just an organisation that is all about peace. I think there's more to them than that, and I think there's a darker side to this organisation. I don't trust them for a second. Um, And the very fact that he is chair of this organization, as far as I'm concerned, rules him out being a potential prime minister. Um, I mean, what would a prime minister, Corbyn, do about radical Islam in this country? It's no good just saying, oh, well, they came about because of Western foreign policy. You can debate the source as much as you want, and that's fine. But the reality is there. Okay? And I am yet to see the Stop the War coalition offer any solution whatsoever to Islamic State. They will campaign and protest about any military action whatsoever, no matter what form that military action takes. But they have no answers. They have no answers in order to, in terms of addressing Islamic State. They have no answers. So I have little respect for any group that just criticizes but doesn't have answers. And to me, that's what the Stop the War coalition is. So when I'm wary of Jeremy Corbyn, it's not necessarily some of his socialist positions in Britain, because right now we are living in a deeply unfair country, and the government's cuts are causing serious, serious problems. So I have no problem with some of the socialist platforms that he's taking in those areas. Um, what this government is doing is reprehensible, turning workers against the unemployed, all this sort of thing. Okay, I totally go along with Jeremy Corbyn on those things. But I think when it comes to a potential leader of a major political party, you have to look at everything. And I am wary of his connections in that regard. That doesn't mean I'm a right winger. It doesn't mean I support, for example, the slander campaign that was going on against Ed Miliband and is almost certainly going to occur against Jeremy Corbyn if he becomes leader. I hate the British tabloid press, and I hate the way. I mean, what Owen Jones said was right. It shouldn't be about policy; it should be about ideas. But by the same token, it isn't. Sorry, it shouldn't be about personality; it should be about ideas. I agree with that. But personality, in terms of what someone stands for, in terms of what their connections are, does have some significance. So I would agree with him on that. And I do think that the right wing media is reprehensible in this country. Now, no doubt conservatives will say, well, the left wing media is just the same. The truth is, it's very, very difficult to find a genuinely centrist outlook. And as a centrist, I find that a bit disillusioning. Because, to be quite honest, The Guardian and The Sun irritate me just as much. Sun is more powerful, so it probably gets to me more. But they irritate me in different ways. The Guardian's just predictable left wing sort of stuff. The militant feminism and all that sort of stuff gets on my nerves. But the Sun, in its vindictive, nasty, callous attitude to the unemployed, the immigrants, the sort of personality assassinations of public figures, I hate the Sun. I hate it with a passion. And I believe that the tabloid press is not a positive force in this country. But what can I do? Because the thing is, they always hide behind a free media. That gives the likes of Kay Burley, Sky News is the tabloid equivalent of news media. They always hide behind free media to just be as the problem with British journalists nowadays, and I'm at the risk of going off on a tangent here, but the problem with so much of British media nowadays is we have a generation of journalists, and I'm not talking about everyone. There are some decent professional journalists out there, but we do have a generation of journalists who are driven by their own ego. They're driven, and this is predominantly, I would say, on the right, but you get it on the left as well. They're driven by their own ego. They're driven by their gotcha moments, driven by just, they're not interested in the truth, really. They're just interested in their own voice. And these are people who are on very heavy salaries. They usually get paid a lot more than politicians do. And they smugly think they could do what they want and say what they want. And frankly, I'm sick of them. Um, and unfortunately, they do have a lot of power, so it's very, very difficult for any public figure to stand up against them. Because if he or she does, they will immediately be ridiculed and slandered. And I just think it's a very unfortunate situation. I do think we're going. If Jeremy Corbyn becomes leader, it will be a repeat of the 1980s. I think that we are going to see an increasingly divided country, but I don't think it's fair to just blame the left for that. You also have to blame a Conservative Party that is absolutely ruthless, that is hell bent on enacting deep cuts. I mean, people keep saying, the Labour Party was defeated, and that's true, they were, but the idea, well, that means there is a right-wing mandate, is misleading. Because if you add up all the votes of the Liberal Democrats and Labour together, I think it totals over 11 million votes. And then the SNP, which is the Social Democrat Party, 1.4 million, you get somewhere around 13.5 million votes. So if you take all of the, and then the Greens, all the left-wing parties together versus the Conservative Party and UKIP, it's probably about 50-50. So the idea that there's a right-wing mandate in this country, and actually UKIP opposes a lot of the cuts. So the idea that the government has a mandate for this is very misleading. We need electoral reform in this country. And that's not just about being a sore loser. Okay, granted, the outcome wasn't what I wanted, but I really, really do believe we need electoral reform. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Jeremy Corbyn and on the current situation in the Labour Party. One thing I will say about Labour, I think their electoral process goes on and on and on a bit too long. I think for future, they need to narrow this down a bit. I think it's off-putting. I mean, really, about 3 months. Um, I appreciate that you can't just choose a leader overnight, but, it's a very long-winded out process, and I think that's actually off-putting to some people. I think 1 month would be a better timetable, or maybe 1.5 months, but not 3 months. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Um, in conclusion, I'm not opposed to Jeremy Corbyn on a lot of his domestic policies. I don't think they're particularly radical policies. I don't think they're as far left as people are making them out to be. Um, does that mean I want to see a Prime Minister Corbyn? No. The ideal situation for me would be some sort of coalition between the centrist and the left winger. Um, like have Andy Burnham as Prime Minister with Jeremy Corbyn in the cabinet, something like that. I don't know. But it's up for Labour to decide what they're going to do, and it will be interesting to see the outcome. Thanks for watching.